If you're on YouTube right now, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. And drop a like and a comment. Thank you. Mr. Jason McGuffie.
Hey, Mr. Brian.
How are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing good. Thank
you.
I
really appreciate you coming in and being able to visit with us a little while. You've been on my mind for quite some time to be able to sit down with you and do this. And I want to tell you why this one is important to me. Okay. And this is going to be the last podcast that we have for 2024. When I look at you and every time I'm around you, leadership, squared away, those are the feelings I get from you.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm sure that the squared away, you can say you're probably just as broken as the next person is. But,
or more so, yeah, for sure.
So I'm not trying to elevate you beyond, but just the way that you preach, the way that you deliver information, it's in a humble but yet confident way to where myself, this is my personal view, is that I believe I can after you've said it.
Oh, wow.
And I believe that I can do after you said it. And to me, that's the mark of a great leader. And I just want, hopefully, some of that to come out today so other people can kind of see what I see in you. And we can kind of talk a little bit about your past.
Oh, man, that's very kind. It may be downhill from here, though.
Oh, no.
That was kind.
It's going to be good. So, Jason, tell us where you grew up.
So, don't hold this against me, though. I'm from South Mississippi, the Brookhaven. It's where I was born and raised. That's where I graduated high school from. That's where all my people are from, that area, Brookhaven area, South Mississippi. So that's where we still call home. That's where we went for Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago. Made a flying trip down there to eat good lunch and then made a flying trip back. So that's home for us for sure.
So only child, or do you have siblings?
I got a younger brother. He's a pastor as well. I don't know if you know that, but he pastors First Baptist Church over around Pearl, Mississippi, in Flowood.
You ever tag team a sermon together before?
We've talked through a lot of stuff over the years. I'm the older brother, and so I've got a couple of years on him, 6 years or so. But I've gotten where I call him a lot and say, "Hey, man, let me run this by you."
Yeah, I think it's always important to be able to have those people in your life that you can trust. That's going to give you the real information you need to hear, not just build you up, but when you
and
need
a brother's good at that.
Yeah,
hey man, you're not thinking this clearly. Let's come back away from the ledge.
But it's important to have that.
It is, and that comes in all shapes and forms. But I'm grateful for him and that he's in the same role that I am as far as pastoring and preaching, and so it's neat to be able to gripe together. Yeah. And to be able to brag on what the Lord's done together and to see what God has done through our life, which is a whole nother part of this thing.
And that's really important to be able to have, for sure.
It is.
So talk to me about, so we graduate high school. Yeah. What was next for you?
Graduated in 2001. I don't know if you're doing the math, but that number is farther away now than it ever has been, Brian. I got one that's fixing to graduate in May, so that puts things in perspective. So I graduated high school. I had written a term paper on being a Mississippi Highway Patrol.
Okay.
That was based on the career path I wanted to go down after high school. So I got to ride with one day. I got it excused from the missing school, and I got to ride with one of those guys, and I was hooked after that and enrolled in college to pursue a criminal justice degree. And I was going to go through college and then hopefully get into that place that I had reserved for the Mississippi State Highway Patrol. So that was the path I was on in 2001 when I graduated high school. At the time, I had met my wife now, girlfriend then, and we graduated at the same time, enrolled in the same college there in South Mississippi. And so we were doing this thing together, and she was in nursing school, and I was in this program to go into that position. But in 2002, it was actually January 22nd of 2002, is when I gave my life to the Lord. And so that changed everything about my trajectory, where I was headed, what was going to happen. I didn't know it at the time. I just thought that I had made a good choice to follow Jesus. Sure. I didn't recognize what that meant. My plans were no longer that important, and he set me on a different path. Obviously, I'm not a Mississippi Highway Patrol.
What happened do you remember the defining moment in '02 when that happened?
Oh my goodness! Right. So it's an interesting back play for just a moment. So I was raised in church, always in church. Went to church, Sunday school, kids stuff, youth camps, all those things.
Typical Southern.
That's exactly
raising.
right. I mean, just what you would expect. My mom played the piano in church, and so that was an amplified. I was there early and late, so I got all I could get, I guess. I play the bass, the guitar, and so through high school, me and some of my buddies had a band, and we would play Disciple Nows, and we would play youth events and stuff like that, just having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
But I did all of that with this reality that I came to know in '02 that I really didn't know. I knew Jesus, and I loved the idea. But I didn't know the person Jesus, right? And
didn't have a relationship.
That's right. And so we were at Copiah Lincoln Community College, is where we were at the time, and we were at a Baptist Collegiate Ministry event. And my wife now, fiance at that point, by the way, the speaker that night said, "Turn to your neighbor and just check on them and see if they died tonight, would they go to heaven?" And she turned to me, kind of not half-heartedly. But the night before, we had led worship in that guy's church. And so she kind of looked at me and she just said, "Hey, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven?" And Brian, for the first time in my life, I couldn't answer that question. And it was the most incredible, surreal moment. And I said, "I need to go down." And she said, "Where?" I said, "Down front. I need to talk to Brother David." His name was David. And so I went down and made a beeline and said, "Hey, David, I need to be saved, man." And he said, "Well, I don't know what you mean, Jason, because of what we had done right there in his church." I said, "Dude, I don't know who Jesus is. I need to know Jesus." And so he led me to the Lord. And I prayed that night to receive the gospel and salvation and all that I knew at the moment. I just begged God to do something in my life. And he saved me that night. I believe that with all of my heart and everything that I am. That was January 22nd, 2002.
How did that change your relationship with your now wife?
Well, it was so early. I don't think it changed much. Now, it changed the plan, and we'll get to that in a minute. But after we got through with that spring semester, I withdrew from that program and that school and started taking some Bible classes, which is an interesting twist. When you think you're going to marry somebody that's going to do this, and now you're marrying somebody who's going to do this, and they really couldn't be farther apart than a highway patrol and a pastor preacher. But that's what happened. But she loves the Lord too, very clearly. I mean, I think you know that. But even at that age, we got baptized on the same day in our church. And so it was just this incredible thing to watch that relationship grow through this change that was happening in my own heart, which then was our heart and our life. So she graduated nursing school from there.
How long from that night in '02 did it take you to make the change with your school?
Okay, so January of '02 is when it happened. I went ahead and got done with that in the semester in May. Through those months, something else was taking place in my life that I really had a hard time explaining. I lived by myself at this point, and she lived at the school, but I was living by myself. Had a place I was renting, and it was almost like God was calling me to salvation, because that's all I could compare it to. So I went to my pastor. He's passed away now, but I went to my pastor at the time, the one who baptized us, and I said, "Preacher, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm saved. I believe it. I know it. He's changed my life. There's no doubt, changed my heart. But there's something going on." And he said, "Maybe you're called to ministry." And I was like, "I don't think so. Like, I'm called to be a highway patrol. I'm confident in that. I wanted to be a highway. I really wanted to drive fast, and I wanted to hide in the bushes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to make people lose their breath when
Right.
I just wanted to be.
I'm with you.
Yeah, like I'm in a hurry to get everywhere all of a sudden, and so I wanted to do that. But I also wanted to help people. And that day that I rode with that guy, man, he changed a flat tire for somebody on the interstate, and he was helping somebody who had been abused. And I mean, so it was this catch-22 for me. And so he's like, "Look, just be praying about that, because God may be calling you into the ministry." I was like, I don't think so, Brother Benden. That was his name. I said, I don't think so. And so some months went by from, it was January of '02. Not long after that, that conversation happened. And we get into March and April, and I'm talking sleepless nights. I'm talking praying, even though I was just now a believer. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was doing my very best. And I'll never forget, I got down on the floor by my bed, and I got the Bible that my church had given me when I graduated high school, and I opened it up to Exodus chapter 4. And I just began reading in Exodus. And I knew of Moses, but I didn't realize that we had a lot in common. God called Moses to go and to help, free the people. And Moses' excuse was he was slow of speech and tongue.
Yeah.
Now, what's incredible about that is I've got a speech impediment. And I was 10, 12, 14 years in speech pathology growing up. And it was terrible. I hated it. I hated school. I hated answering questions in public. I wouldn't talk in front of people. It was just bad. And I can remember that being my main reason of a pushback towards the Lord of there's no way. I know people who can't quit talking, Won't you use them? But after I read that passage, it was this moment of, okay, Lord, if you want this, I'm in, right? So I closed my Bible. The next morning I woke up, called my pastor, said, hey, I need to come talk to you. He said, okay. So I went and I said, hey, man, I think God's called me to preach. He said, yeah, I know. Yeah, he's so confident in it. And so that changed everything. After May, I didn't re-enroll into that program. That fall's when I started taking Bible classes.
Now, how did that sit with your family? How did the family adjust to, I'm changing this path? I've grown up in church and I've kind of done things my way.
Yeah.
And now I'm just bought and sold on my salvation, being able to help others. Now I want to go and start preaching.
It was pretty interesting because of, it's the dynamic of the speech thing, Brian. It really is. And people say, oh, Jason, it don't bother us at all. Well, I know it may not bother you.
Yeah.
But man, does it bother me, right?
Sure.
Like now it does. Not way back then when I was young, but even now it's one of those things that bothers me more than it bothers the people in front of me.
Let me ask you a question on that. Yeah. Are you amazed at have you been enlightened to what you have been able to accomplish even with?
Well, listen, man.
Do you ever reflect on that?
I do. I think about it almost every day because apart from God and His power and blessing, and it just don't make sense to me, right? It just doesn't make any sense that I would be preaching in front of people, especially at a church like ours, man. The First West is a great church with a great footprint and great reach, and to be connected to such a great church with a great reach and be a tongue-tied preacher that does get to preach week in and week out, and just beyond that local church moment, there's a lot of moments when I get to preach, and it's mind-boggling that the Lord would use something or someone like me, and I think that's the part that is the head scratcher for me, because there's way more. There's guys who can speak more clearly that don't have any type of speech impediment. But that moment in Exodus, God used that to change my life. And it's not about what you can't do, but it's about what you can. And He told Moses, who made man's mouth, right? And if I did, I'll give you the word, so just go, right? And so it's just one of those moments. It's just day in and day out, it makes you scratch your head and wonder. It really does.
We have, stories all throughout the Bible. He didn't use the greatest of these to put His message out there. He used the every one of these to be able to put the word out there.
That's right.
So you started taking some Bible classes.
Yeah.
Was that like, did you have a local university that offered that?
So our local Baptist churches had an office there in Lincoln County, Mississippi, and one of the pastors there taught some classes, one or two a semester, through New Orleans, actually.
Okay.
Because we were not far from New Orleans and Brookhaven, an hour and 45 minutes or so, but it was still far enough away. It was so much more convenient to do it there in Brookhaven.
Sure.
And so I was doing those there in Brookhaven, and then I swapped from there to a church in Madison, which is right there north of Jackson. And me and another guy would ride back and forth on Mondays up to class. We'd take 3 classes on Monday evenings, back to back to back. And then we'd, go back next Monday and next Monday. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then we moved to Vicksburg. And that's when I quit doing that and enrolled in a different program.
And when did you finish that program?
Oh, I graduated. I transferred to Southwest Bible College, which is in Houston, Texas. This is when online stuff, I'm old, don't forget that, right? It was this anomaly kind of out there in Never Never Land, this correspondent online stuff. When we moved to Vicksburg, it had gotten to where our house in Brookhaven didn't sell as fast as we hoped it would. And so you're well aware of this problem. Yeah. Well, in Vicksburg, youth pastor at a church there. My wife was a nurse at the hospital there, 2 mortgages. And so I had to pull out of New Orleans. I couldn't afford it. It was just expensive.
So what were you doing during that time as far as for work? Were you working?
Yeah, I was full-time at Emanuel Baptist Church there in Vicksburg as associate pastor and youth pastor. And so although it's the title, that was a long time ago as well. And it was not easy to get to New Orleans or to Madison, and financially we had a new baby. Right. Zach was 5 months old at that point. And so my pastor led me to explore some of these correspondent moments, online correspondent stuff. And so that's when I enrolled in Southwest Bible College, which I got through with a bachelor's degree in 07, 08. And then re-enrolled in a master's program of ministry, just a master's of ministry. Accomplished that one, and then a doctorate in ministry, and I wrapped that up in the end of 2010. Okay.
Were you still in Vicksburg area at that point?
Yeah, I was.
So how long did you work at that church?
5 years.
5 years.
Almost on the day.
So you graduated from the master's program while you're still working there.
Mm-hmm. And the doctorate.
Yeah. So what pulled you away from that church?
So that pastor was good to me. He let me do things that I probably wouldn't let me do. You know what I mean? He let me preach a lot. He let me do different things as the associate pastor. As a young guy, I'm grateful for looking back on that. Exposed me to church life, really. Sure. And so First Baptist Church Tallulah, I know you know where that is, but right across the river from Vicksburg, their pastor had retired after 30 years or something, Brother John Rushing. And one of their search committee members, or pastoral committee, whatever it was called at the time, I don't remember, reached out to our church and said, "Hey, is there somebody that can come preach for us? Like, we're just trying to plug holes." Sure. And so they plugged a hole with me. I went over there. My pastor was like, "Yep, I got a guy. I'll send him over there." So I went over there and preached. And I went to lunch with a couple of them after church, and they were like, "Hey, we're looking for a preacher if you know anybody." I was like, all right, but he has to be this age, and we want this. Churches do that. I mean, churches have the parameters and some requirements that they put on paper. And so I left there and made some phone calls. I said, "Hey, I know a couple of guys. I'll make a touch." And so I did that. A couple of weeks after that, they called me back to preach again. And so I went back and preached again. Then my pastor said, "Hey, you better be ready. They're going to ask for a resume." I was like, "Nah, man, I don't meet the requirement." I was too young, essentially. And so then that next time they're like, "Hey, do you have a resume I can like we can have?" And I was like, "Of course, I'll put one together." So I did. And not long after that, they called me to be the pastor there. And we were there from 2012 to almost 19.
So from 12 to 19, how old were you when you took that position?
Almost 29, 28.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
Lead pastor. Maybe the only pastor at that church. Mm-hmm. You've never done that role, had that responsibility, correct?
That's a fact, yeah.
What do you do at that point?
You tread water.
Yeah. How long did you feel like you treaded water for before you felt like you had a hold on it?
2019. No, I'm kidding. It didn't take long, honestly, because church life is church life, and I've learned that. Big church, small church, country church, downtown, city, whatever. The people want to know that you care. They don't care how much you know. They just want to know how much you care, right? And so I didn't walk in there thinking I had it together, a plan. I just went in there, and the best advice I got from another pastor in Vicksburg, Matt DeBuckles is his name. He was at First Vicksburg. He said, man, pray all the time, and just preach Jesus. I said, okay. And so I went in there and I just preached the best I knew how to preach. It was definitely a learning curve with the organizational aspect and the finances. And, it's like you're thinking you're ready and you jump into a river with a undertow or a current that you're not aware of. And it's a lot, especially when you're the only full-time paid person there. You're the only pastor.
Preach, I got that. Pray, I got that. But all the other stuff, it's kind of new to me.
It's very new. It's very new. And so they were very patient, I think, with me as we walked through these things, which we wound up hiring a worship guy, and we wound up hiring a youth person, and we wound up hiring a secretary and financial secretary through those years. Met and blew the budget out of the water, and God was blessing, and the church was growing. And
so, when you took that church over, would you say they were stagnant? Were they growing? Were they stable?
Brother John had been there a long time and had done that. Church led Louisiana in number of people being baptized at one point.
Wow!
And so he had quite the impact in Tallulah. What had happened in Tallulah was a lot of people left. Yeah. I don't know how else to say it. Like there was a Ford dealership there at one time. Country, I can't think of a little theme park. Country in the Village used to be there years and years ago. Because of all of the farming stuff, what took hundreds of people, all of a sudden takes 6.
Right.
Because of the equipment, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But those people don't have jobs, right? And so in this context of this reality, I guess, it was pretty cool to see that church surviving. It was growing even when I got there. I mean, it had not blown the walls out, but it was a good, healthy church that just needed maybe a new page turned, if you will. And so we did renovations, and we did, upgraded all the things that were needed. We just started slowly knocking those things off the list.
How did the community respond to you guys moving in?
Oh man, it was cool. It was cool. I mean, so here's an interesting point. Me and the youth guy that we brought in, okay, he was a youth and associate pastor, and he did some worship. Our ages combined weren't as old as Brother John.
Wow.
Now, that's not a negative toward Brother John.
Sure.
Right? But young. I mean, like, it was just this whole new, I guess, perspective. I mean, they I don't know if they didn't know it could happen this way, or, man, the church really took a different change or a different turn there. But I turned into the town's guy. Like, I was just, they just loved us well, I did a lot with the city and the mayors and the sheriff's department and the police department. And
how important do you feel like it is within that church community to continue to look for leaders and raise leaders up around you? How important that is to the health of a church and to that population, because you can't rely on the pastor to do everything.
That's right.
If you think the pastor is there to do everything, I don't think you have a healthy congregation.
That's right. One of my rules that I try to live by is work yourself out of a job. Right. Now, there's always things, there's certain things that God called me to do. Sure. Right. Be the husband of my wife, the dad to my kids, and preach and pastor, wherever he places me. But there's a lot of other things, man, that if you give people permission, they're willing to do that. And then when that person does leave, the organization may take a hit, but it's not dependent on the personality.
Correct.
And that is so vitally important. And I think there's been a change over the last decade or two that says this is not a personality-built church. Because personalities, Brian, are going to come and go, whether it be by death or moving or whatever.
Church splits happen based on personalities.
They do.
And I think that is the mark of a very unhealthy church. If you have all of your hope wrapped up into that person that's up there on the pulpit every Sunday.
That's right.
You're just not healthy. You're kind of missing the point.
That's right. That's right. And so we had 7.5 or 8 good years there. I mean, God did some incredible things there while we were there. not because of us, but really in spite of us. I mean, our church grew in a community that was not growing. That church grew, and so it was very encouraging to see how a lot of people forget about those little places, but God knows they're there, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so refreshing. And I was texting that pastor just this morning. They got a new pastor, and he's doing a great job.
What called you away from there?
This is an interesting twist of the story too. While I was there, I did wrap up another degree there in Tallulah. We didn't really have any intentions of moving. Like, we don't ever move to move, if that makes sense. And so whenever people found out I was back in school and I wrapped up a degree, they thought that was a marker for leaving. They always do. That's just how church people think. And that wasn't the case at all. I graduated in 2016, and I stayed another year and a half or so. But we went back to Brookhaven, pastored a church there for not long at all, actually. We moved in 19, pastored there for almost 2 years, which is not something I ever planned on doing. I had known guys that had had short moments in churches, but I moved there reluctantly because that's my hometown. I have heard good things and bad things about pastoring in your hometown. Man, it's great or it's not. We had a great church, great experience, so I can't say it was a bad experience. It was COVID, and we were a rural church. It was a good church, a good-sized church, but we had to work through online stuff, really, really heavy through all of that. While I was there, my uncle got to lead him to the Lord, baptize him. My grandmother, who was my favorite person, is my favorite person ever, but she was in the nursing home, and we were able to get her out of the nursing home and into a smaller, like apartment, little small house, to try to help her be well. So I was able to help majorly with that. And so there were some things that I think God took us there for. I still pastored a church, and God did some amazing things in that short amount of time within that church, but it was a lot to do with us and some relationship building and trying to rebuild some relationships in our family. And not that I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying right there, but we've been gone for so long,
Right.
So my wife and her mom and dad got to spend some pretty cool time together. And then my family and me, my grandmother and stuff like that. She wound up passing away, and I preached her funeral. And so that's what took us there. Church called me. I was doing a revival over in Flowood at my brother's church, and one of the search committee guys were there. He said, "Hey, you want to move to Brookhaven?" I said, "I don't." He said, "I'm going to give you a number to our chairman of search committee." I said, "I don't care. That's fine." Well, he called me the next day, and his name was Vince. He said, hey, this is Vince from Fair River Baptist Church. I said, "Vince, I appreciate the phone call, man, but I'm good where I'm at." And so anyway, that led to a lengthy conversation. We wound up moving down there.
Did you have any other calls like that while you were preaching in Tallulah? Other opportunities were?
Yeah. So those, in our world, that's what we tell everybody, that a phone call can change your life. In our world, a church finds out about you or hears you somewhere or comes across a sermon clip, and that's the danger of online stuff. I mean, like, everybody's everywhere.
Yeah.
Those days of a search committee coming in after the service starts and sitting on the back row, I'm grateful those are over, but you never know who's watching you either,
Sure.
right? And so, churches would reach out, different organizations would reach out, and when God calls us somewhere, me and my wife have always leaned into, if God calls us there, we're not leaving until God calls us away. And those phone calls are encouraging. They mean a lot to you when they come. But if God's not doing that and working through that, then just pump the brakes, right? Let's just come back right over here. But then one came from First West while I was in Brookhaven. And I pushed it away, but it was persistent. So here we are.
So when the pitch was made to you, I don't know how it was made, but that you're not going to be the pastor.
Yeah.
You're not going to be the associate pastor of
Yeah.
the church. We want you to be a campus pastor
Yes.
of the church.
Yes.
Had you been exposed to that setup before, and what was your initial thoughts of it?
So I'll never forget this. I had the phone on the printer in the church office, and our executive pastor called. Our executive pastor now called me then, and I put him on speakerphone because his mom is from that area. So I thought, maybe making some kind of a connection or needed me to do something. Or
Did you know him before then?
Yeah. So me and Michael pastored. I pastored in Tallulah. Michael was pastoring over here. And so we had crossed paths numerous times. Me and Michael were acquaintances, I would say. And so I knew the executive pastor then. And so I put him on speakerphone and answered it. And the church secretary was there and our youth minister was there. And he starts talking and I'm like, oh no. I couldn't hit mute fast enough, Brian. But through those conversations, I had been talking a little bit to the North American Mission Board way back then. Not many people know this. But I was talking to a couple of guys that worked there and was just thinking through what it looked like to do something, felt like, I don't know, just something, church planting or something to that degree. And so when First West called and told me the age of the campus and what the hopes were, and I hung up and called a couple of my buddies at the North American Mission Board and said, hey, what about this? Help me with this. I don't know what multi-site means. I grew up in Brookhaven, Mississippi. Like we don't have that here. Help me know what campus pastoring means. Help me know what this is. And so Tim and Michael were very clear in, hey, you're going to live preach every week. You're going to pastor those people. You are connected to the First West, but we want you to create a culture and lead well and pastor well. And so, honestly, Brian, from a day-to-day perspective, my life's not much different than it was 10 years ago at First Tallulah. I may not be the guy, but I hope I don't ever have to get to the place of I need to be the guy. It's not about me being the guy. That's not what the gospel is. That's not what, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
But God just put me where you want me. I'll do whatever you want me to do kind of thing. And so they've been, y'all, I say they, but you're part of our church. And so y'all have been very good at allowing Calhoun campus to not to become its own thing, because we're still very much First West Calhoun, but we do things that make sense in context of where we are in West Ouachita. I've never felt handcuffed. I've never felt, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And so day-to-day operations, there's not a whole lot of difference. More meetings. But, pastoring is very much, and I think the people there would say that Jason's our pastor,
Outsider looking in, this is me being outsider because I don't, peek behind the curtains very often. I mean, it's
right.
Not something that I'm here to really do. But I get the sense that there's a collaborative effort. You're just not given a piece of paper and say, Jason, this is what you're going to preach on.
No.
Next week. It feels that there's a very collaborative effort within the senior leadership to be able to come up with something that everybody can buy into and that we're going to deliver as one.
Yeah, so that was part of the my pushback when they were starting those conversations. Like, hey, man, I'm not preaching somebody else's stuff. I'm just not going to do that. Nobody's going to tell me what to preach, And no, that's not how we do it here. Well, it was so much of a lane change for me because I had been preaching Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. That was my context, right? And I'd lock myself in my office and I'd pray and I'd read and I'd write and I'd type or whatever, get prepared for my sermons. Well, now you come in and we have a preaching team and we pray through a direction we're going. Right now, as love has a name, Isaiah 9:6. And after much conversation and prayer between specifically me and Michael, it's like, hey, man, why don't we land right here? And then we take each of those names in Isaiah 9:6, the Prince of Peace is his coming week. And we try to come up with the points together, if that makes sense.
It does.
To a lot of people, that's a head scratcher. But when you have a couple of guys who are doctrinally aligned as close as we are and in the theological world aligned as close as we are, then it's not like he's calling your wall black and I'm calling it red.
Right.
It's not that. It's like, yeah, that's a little darker black, but I can go there, because it's still black. And so these points that we produce out of that preaching team is a it's a very cool moment because you're being able to tear apart that scripture, right? I mean,
yeah, and I feel as if we get the benefit of multiple pastors,
That's right.
putting something together to
Yeah.
give us the very best that we as a congregation can digest.
Yeah.
Because there's many things that's written in the Bible that one day I'm going to know the answers to them, but I can't say I know the answers to them now.
I don't think anybody does. That's right.
But I will tell you that there's difficult conversations that happen on the pulpit that you can tell that a lot of thought and energy went into
Yes, sir.
the best way to deliver that so the most can digest that.
And for somebody like me, sometimes, my opinion is always right. Everybody else may be wrong, kind of thing. I mean, that's how a lot of times we all think.
Sure.
But when you come into that room with the mindset of, hey, I'm going to present an idea, and it may not be the best idea in the room or the best worded line, then you have to be humble enough to say, hey, dude, that's better. Like, we are in the same sandbox or same zip code or ballpark, but what you just said is better. Hang on, let me change that. Because the best idea is going to walk out of that room that proclaims God's goodness and the truth of the Scripture. And the way that we word those one-line thoughts make a difference when they hit the screens, right?
What kind of a difference does it make knowing that? And I'm not trying to pull because there's other obligations you have that you bring to our church, but you don't have to sit down and focus so much on all of the money. You don't have to focus so much on building maintenance as much because there is a larger team that can assist you with that.
Yeah.
How much of a relief is that you don't have to put as much effort on that stuff and you can stay in the Word more?
So let me push back a little bit on that one.
Okay.
Not in a negative way. About a year and a half ago, they changed my title again.
You got a lot on your plate, and I hope we cover some of that here in a minute.
Yeah, so this title change, teaching pastor, puts me in just a little bit of a different angle or a different seat. I'm still Calhoun campus. I'm still preaching out there and pastoring that campus, and it's doing well. But it puts me in the finance committee meetings now. Oh, there we go. and so it has allowed me to come alongside Michael and Tim, our lead and executive pastor, in a more cohesive way. And I'm in those more the meetings comments. It's like I said, not much has changed. It really hasn't. I'm responsible for Calhoun campus budget, and there's a lot we could talk about there. But great progress and movements taking place there. But now I'm over here in these meetings, which also puts the DNA of First West even more so
right
at Calhoun. Because I am in those meetings, and then Michael comes out there and preaches, and I come over here and preach, and we're doing this.
So just because we have those extra layers doesn't mean it's taken all those responsibilities off your plate.
Not all of them are off, but they are adjusted. I would say they're grossly adjusted in a positive way.
Good.
I do still have to make the meetings and think through and plan and with these other guys, of course, but we're doing it together as a team, not as a lone ranger, if you will.
So there's an area that I think that you're still kind of overseeing, and that's going to be the and I may be butchering the term here, the Multiply NeLA.
Yeah, Multiply NeLA network.
Yeah, where you're kind of shepherding. I don't know if that's a good word.
Good word.
Other pastors in the area.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So that started some years ago. I think Chad Merrill, if you remember Chad,
I do.
At the Fairbanks campus. He was, I think, one of the first guys that helped to lead out on this. Him and Tim put it together. But what it is they try to recruit, or we try to recruit, 8 to 12. Normally it lands about 10 pastors from Northeast Louisiana, whatever that means to you. I have learned that that's a moving target, by the way.
I can imagine.
But from the river, up to Oak Grove, down to Pollock even. We had a guy from Pollock in our last cohort. And so we get these guys together, and we work through 10 or 12 different meeting times And we go through different books that help church planning and discipleship and admin type stuff. We go through, they give those guys a demographic packet that helps them to see who's around their church and all, like population and how it's broken down. We give them tools to help them build a healthy church culture, be a church that people want to attend, honestly. But it's also a lot of encouragement and accountability. And the longer I'm in this race, I realize and recognize that accountability matters. Having guardrails in your life, that everybody's just this far away from falling miserably.
Yes.
And so to have a moment to where you can encourage another pastor to not quit, to not give in or out, this Multiply NeLA thing accomplishes a lot of different things. It's for church revitalization. It's for discipleship. It's for healthy church culture, healthy pastor and pastor's wife, healthy team. And so that's something that was given to me a year and a half ago. And we ran one cohort last year, and we are beginning to get ready to launch one next month, at the end of next month, to go through the spring.
What's the biggest thing you've learned from it?
That we can't do enough right there. I think that what you realize is guys act like they don't have time, and we don't. I mean, we don't have time for another meeting. I mean, let's just get real. Another thing on the schedule. But when you get them to see that it's not a burden, but it's a blessing to surround yourself with guys that are battling the same things or walking through the same things, or when you get into a room and you get to talk about, hey, how did y'all do this? Oh, that makes sense. Let me write that down. Is it okay if I use that? You know, just this ping pong type effect in conversation is super helpful. And to see these guys walk out of that not prepared to take on everything,
Sure.
but to know that now they have 8 guys they can text, call, or go and visit that's in their corner, that they're not on an island by themselves. I don't care if you've been in ministry for 50 years or 5 months.
Yeah.
I think every pastor needs to get in on this. I really do.
Absolutely.
I would have given anything to have this 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
I can imagine from a very small church being able to have people that you've been able to share with for a certain period of time that you can call and say, look, man, I'm really struggling with this right now. Can I get a little bit of help? Tell me how you would handle it? Yeah. Because the pressure on a small church has to be great.
It's big, yeah.
You don't want to do anything that's going to cause a congregation split.
That's right.
You don't want to do anything that's going to upset the larger population of the church.
That's right.
But sometimes tough decisions have to be made.
That's correct too.
You don't have to necessarily make those decisions with a hammer. Maybe a scalpel's a little bit better.
Yeah.
But having people you trust.
Wise counsel.
Yeah, wise counsel.
That's helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the teaching process, the next step of that. So recently you guys have announced at the church that a partnership with
New Orleans Theological. Yeah, New Orleans Baptist Theological.
So talk to us about what that is and the benefit that we have for it, because it sounds like you took advantage of something similar to this years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But I get the sense that it's a little bit more enhanced now.
So I'm excited about this. I wish people were as excited as I was about it. Not. I guess not everybody shares the same excitement on things. So I was handed about a year and a half ago the residency program at our church, and a lot of people don't know we have that either. But we have this program in place that if somebody has acknowledged a call to ministry, we can plug them in to different areas of the church, from like mine and Michael's office in the pastoral residency lane to student ministry with Mark Cole and Garrett and Nick Clayton, worship ministry with Nick Casey and Corp. Like we can plug in people in our church to help them learn what church life is as a resident and pay them a little something, right? And so this is a major moment. And so when I got this passed to me, this assignment, the residency thing, there was a desire to make it, not that it didn't mean something before. I don't want you to hear this wrong. But I wanted to be able to do something to help these young people, because I'm not one anymore, get farther down the road as fast as possible, right? And so I went to another college and I said, hey, is there some kind of a certificate program or something we can offer or give? And no, not really. So I'm good friends with Dr. Dew down at New Orleans Baptist Theological, and I called him at one of the conferences that we were at, and I said, "Hey, Doc, here's what I'm thinking." He's like, "Hey, call this guy right here. We can definitely do that." Well, me being who I am, I called the same day, right? And I scheduled an appointment. Me and Michael actually went down to New Orleans and spent some time with Dr. Bo Rice is who we talked to. And New Orleans has this desire to put some of the ministry training and learning back into the hands of the local church.
Wow.
Which is huge. Now, there's some things that we can't teach. I'm not teaching Greek and Hebrew, Brian. As much as you want to take those two, I'm not taking them or teaching them. But we teach stuff like evangelism. Last fall, we taught spiritual formation and discipleship. Next month is the class evangelism. It starts the spring semester, and so what we did was we met with Bo. I came back and he told me what I needed to do. So I built out this agreement, if I can use that word, this proposal. Here's what it would look like. Here's the classes that we would offer. I had to write out course outlines for each class. It was a lot. It was a lot. Who would teach the classes? Who would be the dean? We have a dean. Woods Watson is our dean. Who would be the director of admin? Who would be, professors and all these things? And so I proposed all of that to New Orleans. It took me about 6 months to put it together, 6 or 8 months. They brought it back to me for some minor tweaks, of course, because I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you.
Sure.
And then I put it back in their hands, and they gave me the approval. And that came late last spring. And so now we are able to offer classes sanctioned by New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary at First West in the West Monroe location. Now what that means is we can teach up to 25% of a master's and 35% of a bachelor's degree, or vice versa, or somewhere in there. We are approved to teach 15 classes at this point. Now we're doing one per semester at this point to hopefully get some traction. The idea would be to offer 2 or 3 a semester in the future, if we could. But it's not transfer. So those hours don't transfer. They are advanced credits is what they're called. And
What's the difference?
So advanced would be when you go to New Orleans, like if you take all the classes that we can offer you, and you start taking classes like New Orleans online or on the campus. Once you get toward the end of your degree, they come back over here and say you had 9 hours at the First West School of Ministry, and they plug those on the end, and so you're done. They don't come with you. Like, you don't necessarily come in with 9 hours, but you do. You have to be careful how you word that, right? So you have 9 hours, but they're applied on the back end of your degree.
But you won't have to retake those same classes.
No. Like, we send transcripts to New Orleans, and we do all of those things through our office at the church.
So what is the value of having that here in West Monroe, Louisiana?
I'll give you a real-time 12-hour-ago example.
Okay.
Me and Michael were talking to a man. He was a dad, husband, about the ministry and what he needed to do, and he feels God's called him into the ministry, into this certain type of ministry, and he's got a degree in the business world, but is thinking through a degree in the ministry, and wanted to hear mine and Michael's journey. And Michael just graduated last week with his doctorate, and so that's fresh. So we talked to him about that. My journey, online correspondent, stuff like that, to make life a little bit easier. And so I was able to look at him last night and say, hey, man, let me tell you what we've got available. We can offer a seminary class starting next month. It's evangelism. So I would say helpful for whoever, honestly, church member, pastor, preacher, missionary, neighbor, whatever. But is a seminary, it's a seminary level class that could be applied if you decide to go to get a master's in ministry. And I said, it's a discounted rate. It's grossly cheaper than going on campus. Books and everything's about $250, $300 per class. If you're a member of our church, it's a little less. If you're a non-member, it's $100 more, something like that. But it's $300. I'm just going to use round numbers. It's a $300 class compared to a $1,200 class. And so I encouraged this guy last night. Hey, well, why don't you take that class and just see how God starts to move in your life if you pursue this theological education, without having to travel, without carving out an enormous amount of time. It's about 2.5 hours on Thursday evenings. Me and Woods teach this one coming up. So it's fun, practical, real life stuff that's helpful, no matter if you wind up going to New Orleans or not. But there is a lot of people within the 45-minute drive of our church that could try this option, as well as online. Like if they want to go to New Orleans online, they can do that too, but then have one in-person class.
Right, but the ability to be able to have that in-person class will always, in my opinion, be way better than anything you do online because you get context.
I wish I could have done it in person.
You get to ask the questions you really want to know to give you the context that you need. So
I agree.
I'm an in-person kind of guy. There's a lot of continuing education I do online just because, time.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
I don't want to give up 4 hours to sit in a classroom.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to learn something new and stay ahead of the game, that in person is just the way to go.
It is, and that's what people. I hope that this spark ignites in a sense. There's a bunch of young people at the ULM, BCM, that are called into ministry. Well, this is while they're at ULM, they could come over and take a night class. I don't want to bear on this or put too much on these young folks, but this is an option. We have a resident, we did have a resident, now he's part-time in our church, but he was taking a class, that spiritual formation and discipleship class as a resident. It's just a way for him to get even more. But it's open to the general population. Whoever would want to take that class is more than welcome to. It's a great option. I'm excited about it.
Well, I can't wait to see it just really take off and the dream that you had of putting it together really just blossom and grow from here.
Yeah.
You made mention that if you could have one less meeting in your day-to-day life, things would be better. It's just we're always go. We got things going on. And if this gets canceled, something else going to come right on and fill it in.
Yeah.
Knowing that the leadership role that you're in of shepherding a flock, there's people in different stages, of their relationship.
Of course.
This is very personal and can be emotional. How do you handle this with your family? How do you make sure you still have enough of you carved out so that you're giving your family everything that they need? I feel like that's got to be a hard balancing act sometimes.
So,
and not trying to put you on the spot, saying that
full transparent, and I'm transparent. I think you know that at this point. I live in an aquarium. So back when I was in Vicksburg, I can remember it was Mother's Day, and we had a church member in the hospital. And after church on Mother's Day, that's important, I dropped off my wife and new baby to go make a hospital visit. It was non-emergent. It was non-life-threatening. The person just needed a visit from one of the pastors. And so I went. I got home, and obviously, I don't have to tell you the emotion in the room when I walked in the door. My wife was not bitter or angry. Just, it was tough, right? And so from that moment on, that God got a hold of my heart. He really did. And I'm not trying to be super spiritual here or, try to pretend like I'm super spiritual. But my first ministry and call is to be a husband and a dad, period. And I don't use them as a crutch to not do my job. That's not what it is, or an excuse to deflect responsibility. But through these years since then, I have made it abundantly clear that, man, if there's a meeting or a event for my wife or kids, there'll be another meeting. Right? Now, there's some things that we move around and shift because there are things that can't be changed, like a wedding or a funeral or things like that. Like, this is what we do, and we know this. This is all my wife and kids have known. But I hope they know now that I make a valiant effort, a huge effort, to not put things, even good things, church things, in front of them. There'll always be another event. And I hate to say it that way because I love our church. I think you know that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love the church and I love Jesus. But man, I'm not at this, not at the expense of my family, right? And so when I came here, Tim, I love Tim. He's our executive pastor. I was like, hey, dude, listen, here's the deal. And I'm not trying to be prideful or arrogant, but my wife and kids matter to me. And he was like, I wouldn't expect anything less. I will say that the First West has loved me and my wife and kids very well in a way that I wasn't sure existed. Not that my other churches didn't. I don't want you to
No. I
don't mishear what I'm saying.
I hear what you're saying.
But they are on purpose. I don't want anybody to hear anything negative about my other churches right here.
Sure.
Because they all loved us well. We got grandparents in every church. And, we got great people. No matter where we went, God put great people in our life. But as a staff, Tim and Michael and our lead staff, we are very much on purpose with that. And we try to guard that. And if I can't make something that Michael does, or Michael can't, hey, dude, I got it. Go be with Abby and the kids, whatever. And he'll do the same thing. Hey, dude, don't worry about coming because I know that Zach has this, or you and Jessica are doing this. And so, although it's demanding, and it really is demanding, we have quite the culture that respects and holds high that family dynamic.
It's really great to hear, and
it is.
It's great to hear, but it's also great to see. I get to see that lived out.
Yeah.
I'm not part of the staff meetings, but it's very apparent that within our leadership within the church, that family does matter.
Yeah, our church does very well the loving on the payroll, the staff, and their families very well.
So I started the conversation out telling you my thoughts on you as a leader. What do you hope to, what are some of the leadership principles you want to leave behind as a legacy to your kids?
Oh, that's a big question, man.
Yeah.
As part of the background that we didn't get into was I come from a very broken home, and my dad's been gone since I was a young boy. Matter of fact, I'm not sure where he's at now. Haven't seen him since I was 18. I saw him whenever his dad passed away. I saw him for the first time in 15 or 20 years. So beyond the pastoral stuff, the brokenness that I experienced, I didn't say people didn't love me either. I'm real careful with that. Mom did the best she could with two hard-headed boys. Just for the record, I'll acknowledge that. But some of the things that we went through, some of the abuse and some of the things that we endured as a kid, stuff like that, coming now to having one almost graduate in high school, I just never want them to doubt that other people matter. You never know what the next person's going through. Don't ever ask anybody to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Love people well. I didn't say you were going to be perfect at it, but do your very best. But above all those things, the Lord left us an example that we should follow in His steps. And we don't have to look hard to know how to lead and how to leave a legacy.
Right. Wash
feet, man. Love people that other people don't love. To cross the road and talk to the person that society says you shouldn't talk to. It may be awkward and tough, but it's worth it because we're talking about eternity. Man, I want to be the person that nobody knows exists but makes an impact. I told my son, Zach, son, your name don't have to be in flashing lights to make a global impact. just serve Jesus well, and he'll do the rest. But there's a lot to that question in my mind, because it's coming from a very personal place. My son and daughter will never have to wonder if their daddy loves them. Hopefully my wife will never wonder if her husband loves her, especially going through what I did. That's one thing I don't want them to ever have to wonder. And then I don't want them to wonder if I love Jesus or not. So.
My one takeaway from this conversation today is that never forget the fact that the person on your left or your right
Yeah.
has made the decision to be able to follow Jesus. You may see them in church every Sunday. They may be in the praise band. They may be even teaching a class.
Yeah.
Never assume the person on the left or right. So
Don't be ashamed to ask them either.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jason, I appreciate your leadership.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate your friendship. I
Likewise.
appreciate everything that you do for our community. And don't stop.
Come on, man. Thank you for that, Brian. I appreciate you, dude. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We really appreciate your involvement. Please leave us a comment, or even better yet, subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for every new episode when it hits.